Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 5 of Poker Uncensored. I'm your host, Matt Solon, and I'm joining you live from the great state of Maryland. And why am I in Maryland? Don't you all know that I live in New England? Well, I am here because I'll be playing in the World Poker Tour. I play for 500,000 guaranteed, and that kicks off tomorrow for me. But tonight I'm with you so we can talk about whatever you want to talk about. So normally when we do Poker Uncensored, we have an agenda. We've got items that we want to get to. We've got guests that we want to talk to. Tonight we don't. And so a little bit about me before we get into it. So my name is Matt Solon. I'm a tournament-focused poker player in New England, but today in Maryland. And I launched a poker community and podcast to give people a chance to talk about poker with freedom to speak their opinions without the fear of persecution and censorship. There's a lot of people out there who they want to shut down the voices that they don't agree with. They want to get people who they don't agree with to be silenced, to not be able to talk, to not be able to speak freely. And it's terrible, and I'm not going to stand for it. So I started a community where people don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about being censored, and they can talk about poker freely. And as I mentioned, I'm in Maryland getting ready to play the WPT, 500,000 guaranteed. And if I win, I'm going to throw some of that money back to our loyal listeners and viewers and run some sort of awesome contest if I win this tournament. So today we don't have an agenda. It is wide open for what people want to hear about, what people want to talk about. People can ask their questions and give suggestions directly on YouTube. They can post their questions and suggestions on Twitter using the hashtag Poker Uncensored. And of course, they can post on the new Poker Uncensored Facebook page. That's right, we have a brand new page. Our marketing guy is trying to do a little work to make it a little nicer, but it's up and running now, and people can use it. So enough of that, though. Let's look at what we've got in here for questions. So let's see here. Jay, who is a big fan of apparently the First Amendment, says that any non-trolled questions are available to be answered. So yes, Jay, basically, if the local poker trolls want to show up and they want to just ask really stupid questions that are pointless, those ones we're not going to bother to hit. It doesn't really matter to hit those, right? They're not real questions. They're just stupid trolls that people don't even care about, that are basically a waste of my time. But we're going to get to the stuff that people actually care about and that people want to talk about. And so our first question is actually a strategy related question that's coming up here. And it comes from Mr. Andy Weiner. Um, and Andy wants to know, at what number of big blinds do you start thinking about shoving your stack all in? And that's an interesting question because from a strategy perspective, I would say that I start thinking about potentially shipping my stack all in when I get down to about 40 big blinds. And a lot of people will say, wow, you're crazy. You must be a terrible poker player. Why would you ship it all in with 40 big blinds? Well, reality is that when you get down to about 40 big blinds, you might actually want to put all the chips in, because if you run into a situation where, let's say you are in late position, there's been an open to 3.5 times the big blind, and then there's been a re-raise, and that's a strong re-raise up to, say, 10 big blinds. At that point, you're looking at, all right, well, I wake up with aces, I wake up with kings. What do I do here, right? So it's already been raised to 10 big blinds. I've got 40 left. Am I going to 4-bet to 20 big blinds, to 25 big blinds, and then fold on a flop? Probably not. So when you've got that sort of situation with 40 big blinds, you get aces, you get kings, you might as well ship it all in. But then really when it gets down to, having a shorter stack, right? So let's say you get down to around 20 big blinds, your position, the way the table's going, and the cards you get come into key play. So if I have ace king suited and I have 20 big blinds in late position, there is a good chance I am shipping it all in, right? Because I'm either going to take down the pot there, or if I, get called, there's really only two hands that have me absolutely destroyed: pocket aces and pocket kings. If I get called by pocket aces or pocket kings because somebody slow played it, so be it. But most of the time, you're going to get called by hands that are probably smaller pocket pairs, right? Pocket jacks, pocket queens, pocket nines. You're drawing in that case, but it's not that bad of a draw. And when you get called by something like ace queen, ace jack, ace 10. Even I've seen king jack offsuit call all ins against ace king. I've seen, jack 10 suited. Hands that are obviously weaker than you, that you've got beat. When those hands call, you're obviously well ahead. And, if you get sucked out on and you lose, you get sucked out on and you lose. But I think it's the right move in that case. Now, Jay, again, big fan of the First Amendment, so am I, wants to know, does shoving with 40 big blinds take into account a big blind ante? And it does. So I would say, again, it's a very rare circumstance that I'm going to ship 40 big blinds in. It's when you've got, maybe a limper, a raise, and a re-raise, and to call off is going to take, 12 big blinds. To 4-bet is going to take at least 22 big blinds, and your stack is only 40. That's the point where I'm getting it all in. But yeah, the big blind ante, you're going to have a little bit more money in there, and then you have to take into account, well, what's the stack size of the big blind? A lot of people, even though they shouldn't do this, they should recognize, hey, the big blind is ante is essentially dead money in the pot. A lot of people feel committed to that, and it causes them to call off a wider range than they normally would call off because of the big blind ante. So again, we kicked off early today. A lot of people will probably be joining the podcast around 9:30, which was the time that we said we were going to definitely kick off and get rolling. So we're going to hit a couple of other questions that people came in with before. So I'm going to take one that came from Katie. And Katie wants to know, do you think smaller stakes than 1-2 no limit will ever make it into New England? And Katie's got a good question, right? So some people, they may not have the capital necessary to play a 1-2 game, because as small as that game is, to be properly bankrolled for it, and let me just break out the old calculator because why not, right? So to be properly bankrolled for that game, right, apparently you're going to want to have something like 80 to 100 minimum buy-ins. And so that means that you need $24,000, right? Or sorry, 80 to 100 full buy-ins, right? So if $300 is a full buy-in and you need to have 80 of those, that's $24,000 that you need. A lot of people don't have that kind of money lying around, so that they might want to naturally play at smaller stakes. And that kind of makes sense. But how do you get smaller than that? Well, you're going to have like 50-cent chips on the table, or quarter chips or something like that. And for the house, though, that doesn't really give them the opportunity to make money. So the reason being, if you think about the rake, right? Somebody ships in like 50 big blinds or whatever, but or let's say 30 big blinds, right? Somebody ships that all in, and they get called, and so you have like 60 big blinds in the pot, but it was like a, 25-cent, 50-cent game. Well, the pot only has $30, and so they're probably raking like $1 or $2 out of that. Where if people were shipping in like, 30 big blinds in a 1-2 game and getting called, well, they're going to be collecting a full rake on that. And so that makes it a little bit cost prohibitive for the house to run. But Jay did chime in here and he said, hey, Mohegan has a 1-1 game, right? Buy-in range 40 to 100. And I think that's probably the lowest that you can really run in New England and still be profitable. I also think that, given the success of 1-3 that we've seen at Encore, I don't think anyone's really demanding lower stakes, right? You have a lot of people coming and playing 1-3. Maybe they're not properly bankrolled for it. I would argue that probably like 75% of the people you see playing cash poker in New England are not properly bankrolled. But some people just they they don't care about their bankroll, right? Some people really don't care if they lose all their money playing poker. If they go broke playing poker, they don't care. They're like, all right, whatever. I lost all my money. So, that happens. And that's good for people who are serious poker players, people who are grinding, people who are trying to make money. When you have people showing up, punting off money left and right, it gives them an opportunity to get in there. So Jay's other question that he had was, can you clear up the controversy of your recent Heads Up simulcast event? So, I got a question from another guy as well, Joe Murphy. He was asking about that. And basically, the controversy was that some people are alleging that Joe Frizzy cheated and he rigged the game to have them actually deal the cards in the reverse order that he should have been dealt so that he would win. Now, That is an allegation that I find to be outrageous. Mr. Frizzy showed up. He played in that first round honorably. Perhaps the dealers did make some mistakes. Perhaps, I would have had ace jack instead of jack nine in that hand. But I believe he played honorably. I don't think he cheated. Um, so, that's my take on it. And you know what? I'm surprised nobody's asked about an even bigger accusation of cheating. But from my perspective, Frizzy played honorably. He didn't cheat. He won that match fair and square. Now, the second one, he sucked out on me. That's a different story. But he still didn't cheat. He just got lucky. So, moving on to another question. Hopefully, we'll get some more folks on the podcast. We've got a little bit of a light attendance, but again, we kicked off 15 minutes ahead of schedule to get to some things before the bulk of folks came on. So, get your questions in now because they may not get answered later on because this podcast is actually going to wrap up tonight by 10 p.m. So we're limiting it to a half hour, which is a little bit shorter than some of our prior podcasts, but it's still going to be a worthwhile time to join in, ask questions, etc. So on to our next question. By the way, tell all your friends if you've got friends. I know some poker players don't. But if you've got friends, tell them to join in and join in on the fun. So, next question that came in, right? So, we had a question that came from an anonymous person, and he must be local to New Hampshire because the question was, do you think the owner of Cheers was corrupt and stole money? So, well, I love how people just constantly ask about this room, left and right, left and right. But basically, no, I don't think the owner was corrupt. I don't think he stole any money. In fact, I believe he was actually cleared of any accusations of money being stolen. I believe he was cleared by the investigation that was done by the New Hampshire Lottery Commission. I know a lot of people would love to have him on the podcast. I have asked him. Unfortunately, he is tangled up in legal matters like crazy and can't come on the podcast until all of those get resolved. So, not much else there, but the answer here, no, he didn't steal any money. So, let's see here. So, I have a question from Chris P. And I don't know if it's the famous Chris P from the New England poker scene or not, but Chris P wants to know, would you ever consider folding ace king under the gun? So let me put this up here. So ace king under the gun, would you ever fold? So under the gun, with ace king, I'm most likely going to be raising. I don't see myself folding this in many situations. I think if I'm short stacked enough where I'm at risk of going out of the tournament, then I'm probably actually shipping it with ace king. But under the gun, I'm probably I'm probably actually raising. Now, if I raise ace king, let's say I'm deep stacked, I'm playing something like the Borgata Almighty, I have 1,000 big blinds, I'm deep stacked, right? So I raised maybe, let's say it's 200, 400, or what? Well, at that point, I wouldn't have 1,000 big blinds with a starting stack. But anyway, let's make this simple. Let's say the blinds are 100, 200, I have 500 big blinds. I might raise to say 600 there. Now, if there is a re-raise and another re-raise, I might fold ace king there. If there's simply a 3-bet, I'm probably going to call. I'm probably going to see a flop. Now, could I be getting 3-bet by better? Of course, yes. I could be getting 3-bet by pocket pairs. I could be getting 3-bet by, ace king suited, but that's less likely if I have ace king. But we're going to play that one post flop. That's how it's going to roll. I don't see I don't really see a space where under the gun I'm ever folding ace king, right? There's now late position. If there's, let's say there's a raise and a shove, I could easily get away from ace king. It's not a hand that I'm going to get caught up early in a tournament with. So let's see here. The next question that we've got tonight to talk about. This is another question from Mr. Andy Weiner. So I don't know Andy, but he's asked he put in a lot of questions. So Andy said, how do you deal with angle shooters at the table? So this is an interesting topic. angle shooters at the table. So I actually like to take advantage of their angle shooting and turn it against them and beat them, because I think that kind of puts them in their place. But ultimately, to defend against the angle shoot, you have to look at what they're doing. A lot of angle shooters take advantage of the fact that their action might not be clear, or they might be able to claim it's not clear. So they could say, "Oh, I never checked," when somebody fires off a bet. Well, now they know that that person was going to bet, so then they could figure out, what do they want to do there. Somebody might, um, you know, check or seem to check and then let somebody else put chips in, let somebody else call them, and then they say, "Hey, you guys passed me," or whatever, right? So what I like to do to combat the angle shooters is just say, "Was that a check?" You ask them that question, right? So you think they checked, but it wasn't clear. You ask them that question, you make them verbalize and make it extremely clear what their action is. So that way the dealer knows it, the rest of the table know it, obviously you know it, and that shuts down that type of angle shooting, right? The same thing, when people try to um, convince, I've seen it where, people basically, they don't table their cards immediately at showdown. They think other people might just muck and they'll somehow win. So what I'll do is I'll, one, table my cards at showdown, and two, force them to table their cards at showdown as well. That way they can't pull off the angle shoot. I'm not going to be mucking my cards that might actually have been the winner. So the next question that came up here is from Jay again. Jay, big fan of the First Amendment. We'd love to have you on the podcast sometime to talk here with us. And by the way, if anybody wants to join us live, let me know. We can probably get a couple folks on and have another conversation. We do have one guest who is lined up to come in and talk about a very interesting topic later this evening. But Jay's question is, who is the more disrespectful poker blogger? Greg D. Gregorio, Joe Frizzy, Mikey Donuts, John Murphy, Matthew Spirito. So, all right. So let's see. Mr. Gregorio, I didn't know he was a poker blogger, but okay. No, he seems to be a good guy. Mikey did not see. He occasionally likes to troll. No issues. I don't know who John Murphy is. And then Matthew Spirito. I haven't seen the guy in a while. He does definitely enjoy the occasional trolling. That's for sure. But I got to go with Joe Frizzy as being the biggest one of the trolls here and the most probably disrespectful poker blogger. Although, again, to be clear, I don't think he cheats at poker. All right. So let's see if we have any people who have come in via Twitter to ask any questions about tonight's podcast. There is nothing on Twitter yet. Again, if you want to get your question on the podcast or you have an idea for us, tweet with hashtag Poker Uncensored. Again, that is hashtag POKERUNCENSORED, Poker Uncensored. Tweet with that. We'll get to your questions tonight. Continuing on, let's see, another topic that came in, and this is from a anonymous person, um, which is practically a troll, but I'm going to take this one anyway because I've actually got a lot of insight into this topic. So, question that came up: how is it that someone with a decent job ends up having to fly on Southwest? So, I traveled to Maryland this evening from Boston. I flew on Southwest Airlines. Now, some kind of joke about Southwest Airlines, they're actually not that bad, right? So, first off, if you look at the Boston to BWI route, who flies that nonstop? So your options are Southwest, JetBlue, and Spirit Airlines. Now, of the three, JetBlue is probably the best airline to fly because they have greater legroom, they have free Wi-Fi, they have seat back entertainment. They also give you snacks and beverages complimentary. Spirit is by far the absolute worst airline to fly. They basically have no entertainment, no free Wi-Fi, or I don't even know if they have Wi-Fi at all. Absurd seat pitch. They charge ridiculous fees for bags. Anyway, Southwest doesn't charge for bags. Now, I didn't have to check my bag, but if I wanted to, I wouldn't have had to pay a bag fee. Also, Southwest has no change fees. So there is a value proposition to flying Southwest. They do have open seating, which is advantageous to some people, not so great for others. Because they don't have, though, a first class concept, and nobody who flies that route nonstop really does have a first class concept, it just made sense to fly Southwest. The price is right, the schedule is right. I was able to conduct a full day of business before heading to the airport and flying to Maryland. So that's how I ended up on Southwest. And would I fly Southwest again? Yes, I would. The service was actually very good. Instead of these flight attendants being lazy like they are in some of the other airlines and saying, oh, it's a short flight, we're not going to have beverage service, the folks on Southwest managed to not only get a bag of pretzels to everybody on the flight, but to get them beverages on the flight. So that was a good experience. And also, they have a fairly modern fleet of aircraft, right? So I was on a 737-800. That's not to be confused with the 737 MAX 8. That's a different aircraft. Now, some of the trolls probably hoped I was on a MAX 8 because it might crash, but those are currently grounded. The 737-800 is a slightly older aircraft, but still very modern, very nice with the Boeing Sky interior, great overhead bin space. It was comfortable enough for an hour's flight. So that's why I was on Southwest. Now, the other factor here, and this is something that's just terrible when it comes to competition, right? I love competition. It's good in poker because it means that the consumer is going to get a better experience because you're going to see poker rooms basically competing against each other to have the better customer experience and the better action. In the airline sector, the US airlines are basically insulated against foreign competition because foreign carriers can't fly a lot of these domestic routes. So from Boston to Baltimore or even Boston to Los Angeles, you know, routes like that, ones that are heavy on business travel, right? Las Vegas to Boston, Boston to San Francisco, New York to San Francisco. Those routes are only flown by these US carriers because of regulatory climate that basically prevents foreign carriers that have better service and more modern aircraft, so like Qatar Airways, Emirates, Cathay Pacific, for example, they can't fly those routes because if they did, they would put some of these companies like American Airlines basically out of business because nobody in their right mind would book their flight on AA when they could fly in Emirates. Anyway, off of the travel sector now, but hey, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to chime in. We're going to go on to a question from Jay here. Are the rumors of Hampton Falls Poker Room closing true? That is a loaded question. So, are the rumors true? Well, right now they're not, but they could in the future because Hampton Falls just doesn't seem to be doing much to draw in players. Now, they added heads up tournaments. That was a great ad, right? Nobody else in the state was doing it, or even in New England really was doing the heads up matches. Hampton Falls is, but how many people do you draw in to play a heads up match, right? You maybe draw in two people. Maybe they get a spectator and they order a beer or something. But the thing with a heads up match, you're basically saying, hey, we're gonna have two people play against each other. So all right, so let's say three of them are going on. All right, you've brought in six people. Yeah, that's an incremental bring in, but it's not like running a tournament where you bring in like 50 people or you bring in 130 people or 200 people like they used to do. So Hampton Falls is making some smart moves, right? I think those heads up events are a smart move, but what they really need to do is make capital investment into their building, right? They should be rolling out, new tables. I think if they went with Gorilla Gaming, that's the people that made the tables for some of the tables at WSOP and also the tables in Manchester. If they went with that, got great tables, USB chargers at the table. If they got a table that they could do live streams on with RFID readers, if they got brand new seating, did a revamp of their food menu to have great food and wider selection, and if they started to make the player experience stronger, that would do a lot for that room, but they just aren't investing in it. And I can't figure out, why. The word is that, the owner, he wants to sell the place, and if that's the case, then what are you selling exactly when you sell the place? Because if you lose all your customers and you're trying to sell it, that's not going to draw as much money. Is he really then at that point just selling a building and selling the land, because at that point you don't really have much of a business to sell. So I don't know what's going on there, but they really need to do more to draw in people, and they really need to do something to make their tournaments competitive. And actually, that probably gets back to the fact that, hey, New Hampshire, it's hard to compete in New Hampshire. And why is it hard to compete? Because the politicians don't care about jobs in New Hampshire. They're off doing their political shenaniganry, hoping they can get reelected, pandering to special interests, and they're doing absolute zero to ensure that the charitable gaming sector in New Hampshire stays strong and that people have jobs, because there are a lot of great dealers that are working at places like Hampton Falls, Boston Billiards, Manchester Poker. Um, you know, these are people who, if these rooms close down, they aren't going to be able to feed their families, right? They're going to be forced to collect welfare. They're going to be forced to go on unemployment. And the politicians aren't doing anything. So I've told these politicians what they need to do, right? I gave them a 5-point plan. And that 5-point plan basically outlines how they can solve the problems that are afflicting the great state of New Hampshire. And for some reason, you know, the politicians, they just aren't doing that much to improve and fix anything. So in my 5-point plan, though, basically, I outline, why this is important, but I tell them they need to eliminate the mandatory 20% poker rake. They need to expand gaming hours. They need to eliminate the max total buy-in of 250. They need to allow multi-flight tournaments, and they need to allow tournament prize pool guarantees. And those 5 things, if they're enacted, will make New Hampshire much better in terms of being able to compete. The mandatory poker rake being eliminated will allow New Hampshire to compete, because you have other casinos in the region taking, 15%, 12%, even as low as 9% rake. Expanded gaming hours will allow better tournaments to run. They can run something like a breakfast or a brunch tournament. Raising the max total buy-in. You could buy in for like $1,000 at a cash game, and then you could fire off, 17 bullets in a day and lose 17 grand if you want. But you can't play a tournament that's 300. And of course, having multi-flight tournaments and guaranteed prize pools will draw more people in. So they need to make those changes. And I think that would be great. Moving on to another question here. So, Mr. Scott Gilman, he has said here, and this, I don't know if he's trolling. He might be, but whatever. We'll hit it. Scott said, when you finally dump 6 buy-ins in this one tournament, will you finally give up the charade? I don't know what charade he's talking about. I am here to make sure that people in the poker community have an advocate, that people have an opportunity to discuss things freely. But Scott, do you really think I'm going to punt off 6 buy-ins in one tournament? Come on. All right. So yeah, I'm prepared to fire multiple entries to the tournament, but that just makes sense. I didn't fly all the way to Maryland to, enter one time, and if I get pocket aces and some idiot calls off a 3-6 offsuit and runs out straight somehow, that I'm going to turn around and go home. Hopefully that scenario doesn't happen. My goal is to make it all the way to the end and win this thing in one entry, but I might enter more than once. And what I've realized is that there's actually an advantage to being prepared to enter more than once. You don't have to play scared, right? If you enter a tournament and you're only got one chance at this, some of those marginal situations where taking a little bit of risk can have a big reward, you might just get out of. You might fold to keep yourself in the tournament and give up the opportunity to be positioned to win. And that's the way that I'm playing, right? I'm playing to win. I don't want to just make a min cash. I don't want to play for 2 days, or whatever, a full day of poker and win, $60 of profit. I want to be there at the final table, and I want to be playing for the title or the trophy or first place if there's no title or trophy. Though I do think titles and trophies are kind of cool in poker, right? It's Manchester. I like what they did with like a title belt, kind of like on wrestling. Which, by the way, this is the week that SmackDown Live moves to Fox, so it'll be on Friday night. And I thought that was cool. I think that also is a way that you can continue to draw attention to the room in the tournament. So if, for example, let's say a title belt gets created and that title passes from winner to winner to winner, right? So you've got photos of the champion there, and they've got to come back to the next tournament and defend their title. That would help draw players in. So then let's see. So yeah, if I dump six buy-ins, Scott, that's not likely to happen. I mean, come on. I feel like you've probably entered tournaments where you've entered multiple times and still managed to lose as well. There's people that actually I've seen enter tournaments 10 times. Some of them are actually ridiculous and reckless. I will not be ridiculous and reckless. I've seen people just call, hoping to get lucky, and then they get knocked out of the tournament. They go to the rebuy line, and they're back in 3 minutes, and they do it again. That's not going to be me. So then the next question that came up, in blackjack, do you split tens versus a dealer six? So the answer here is no. So it is a bad move for the player to split tens versus dealer six. Basically, when you have tens, your hand is valued at 20. The only way that you lose there is if the dealer draws to one thing, and that's to a 21. If the dealer ends up with 19 or less, you win. If the dealer ends up with 20, you push, and if the dealer ends up with more than 21, well, you also win. So you split the tens there. You might draw another 10. That's good. But then you might end up drawing, a 3, and then you've got to stand on 13, and then the dealer ends up with 17, and now one of them wins and one of them loses, and it's a giant push. Whereas if you just stayed, you might have won. So I'm staying. Now, some casinos actually don't let you split tens, and I can't figure out why, because it's a good thing for the casino. The house makes more money this way. Mohegan Sun will not let you do it. I have no idea why. Their people must be nuts down there to basically ban something that's majorly favorable to the house, but they apparently don't allow it. Moving on, let's see here. Do we have... Oh, here is the big question for the night. So Andy Weiner earlier sent us this one. And Andy wants to know, what should happen to Mike Postle if he cheated? Well, that's an interesting one. So for those who don't know, Mike Postle, he's a player who plays very regularly at Stones. He's on their live stream and live broadcasts a lot, and he wins a lot. So he'll make these crazy folds. He'll call off light, and somehow he manages to win. Is it a mix of? I think some of it he's getting lucky, some of it's skill, but the accusation is that the guy is a cheater, that he was getting fed information about the hole cards that people had, and there's 5 to 6 hours of video out there that Joe Ingram put together, just showing these situations and how he always seems to be looking down at his phone, etc. So Stone said they did an investigation. There was no cheating. They've now kind of come back on that and said, hey, we're suspending our poker broadcasts until we get more information. That investigation, until they do an investigation, right? That investigation is going to be very, very interesting to the entire poker community, because this is a guy who, people actually watched him to try to learn how to become a better poker player. And if the way he did it is by cheating, that's a huge disgrace. He would be a very dishonorable player if he cheated. And I think if he cheated, so a couple of things. One, for every session that he played where he cheated, he should have to give that money back to the players that he took it from. So basically, his ill-gotten gains forfeited if he indeed cheated. Secondly, the guy should clearly be banned from ever playing in the poker room at Stones ever again. Third, and this is kind of the vigilante justice, but basically anybody else in the poker community, if they ever see this guy in a poker room, should basically stand up, point at him, and say, hey, cheater, we don't want you here, because nobody wants people who are cheating. And back in the Old West, now this is obviously not legal anymore, But in the Old West, when they played poker, it used to be that if somebody was cheating, they were probably not going to be around to cheat ever again, because there were one of two things were going to happen. They were going to just get shot. That would basically take care of them. Um, or somebody was going to find a tree and a rope, and they were going to be hung, and then that would pretty much preclude them from ever playing another poker match again. So obviously, in the modern era, you can't just go around rounding people up and hanging them because they cheated at poker. But they used to do it in the Old West, and I actually think that there may be, if he indeed cheated, there may be some sort of statute for fraud or some sort of law that he actually could probably be indicted under and face justice. Now, he would likely just go to jail. They're not going to give him the death penalty for cheating at poker, but it would serve him right. If the guy has to go to jail, and by the way, you cheat at poker in jail, it's not going to end well for you. So, I think he should definitely be punished if he did cheat. I think the poker community shouldn't tolerate him. They should kick him out of Stones, and he should have to forfeit the ill-gotten gains. But right now, the thing is that it's really hard to prove that Postel cheated, because even with the video that's out there, even with the stuff that's been put out as evidence, it's all circumstantial, right? It doesn't prove definitively that Postel cheated. And that's the problem. You can't, he's probably guilty in the court of public opinion, but you can't find him truly guilty unless you can prove that he cheated beyond a reasonable doubt. And I don't think we're there yet. The Juice, O.J. Simpson, was accused of committing murder, actually a double murder, and everybody thought he did it. Well, actually, not everybody. There's a mix in the country, but a lot of people thought he did it. A lot of people thought the guy was guilty, but he was acquitted because that glove did not fit. And if the glove doesn't fit, you have to acquit. And it worked, right? He got acquitted. So continuing on to our next question here. So Jay again wants to know, if the Manchester Poker Room created a Matthew Solon bounty tournament, what should the buy-in for the tournament be, and how much should the bounty be? So, I think if I was the bounty on a tournament, I had the full capability to promote this thing. It was heavily pushed. It was timed right. It was a great structure. I believe that we could see 200 people show up to play. And I think that, in New Hampshire, that sort of event, it's got to be a $250 event, because that's basically the most you can do for a tournament. And I think the bounty for it should be a how do I describe this? It shouldn't be a fixed amount, right? So the way that the bounty should go, it should be something like, an initial bounty of like $500. And then on top of that, based on how the person knocks me out of the tournament, there should be some sort of bonus, right? So if they get the chips in good, let's say that they have pocket aces and I call off with, Jack 5 suited, and they win because they obviously were way good. If they get the chips in good, they should get a bonus of like 500 or something. And then if it's a matter of them just sucking out, basically there would be a bonus if you get the chips in good against me, not for sucking out on me. Then again, the opposite might be the way to go, right? So if we want to create a ton of action in this tournament, and you want to get all the people in who want to be able to say, haha, I sucked out on him, maybe make the bonus where, hey, if you get the chips in good against me, you're only getting the 500. But if you suck out, you're going to get some sort of extra money, right? So if you suck out because you had a lower pocket pair, you get an extra 100. If you suck out because you played something ridiculous like 5-9 offsuit, 3-6 suited, whatever, you get $500. That would be a cool concept. All right. So does anybody have any additional questions? We're getting to the last 4 minutes of this episode of Poker Uncensored. Let me check and see if we had anything that came in via our Twitter queue here. So let's see here. Where is my Twitter queue? Nope. So the Twitter queue does not have anything additional. So nothing from Twitter. Let's see if we have anything on the Poker Uncensored Facebook group or in Northeast Poker Unlimited. And then, of course, we'll take additional questions from folks that are on YouTube, watching live. Let's see here. Oh, there was a question about if we would try to get Mike Postel on this podcast or not. That was a question that came up. So as far as Postel goes, I tried to get in touch with him earlier. I wasn't able to get in touch with him. But yes, he will be, this is an open invite. If he wants to come on the podcast and he wants to explain to the poker community, why these allegations against him are untrue, I would love to have him on. If he wants to come on and confess and actually openly admit that he cheated, he did the poker community wrong, and he's going to give back all the money that he illicitly took, that's great too. So whatever he wants, we'll have him on. Now, of course, I doubt he's going to come on and openly admit he cheated, because then he's probably going to wind up in jail. So that's the problem. And then, so realistically, if he comes on, it's going to be to basically talk about how he didn't do it. Jay here has another question. If you could play in one New Hampshire poker room for the rest of your life, which one would it be and why? So I think, if I had to choose one New Hampshire poker room, it's the only place I can play in for the rest of my life, I've got to go with Manchester Poker. And here's a few reasons why. So one, they have free parking. When I show up, park my car, I don't have to pay for it. Awesome. Secondly, Manchester runs a decent schedule of tournaments, right? They have a nightly tournament on Tuesday, nightly tournament on Thursday. They run, I believe, a Saturday or Sunday event. I think they do have some opportunity to potentially expand their tournaments. Friday might be a good day because Monday and Wednesday they have billiards running tournament to compete against. But basically, they run tournaments. They get a good crowd for those tournaments. They're doing $250 bounties on every Tuesday and Thursday tournament on someone this month. I think Jack Cologne was the bounty earlier this week, or potentially tonight. He's the bounty. I'm in Maryland, so I couldn't make it. I think they have Shane Tufts, who's another great guy, as a bounty coming up as well. And that's one factor. They obviously have the cash games going. Now, the cash game's taken a bit of a hit in recent years, but it is what it is, right? It's hard to compete against the cash games that are going on in Encore. And then the other factor that's great at Manchester, they have a solid food and beverage program going there, right? They have a full service restaurant and bar. So if you want hard liquor, you got it. If you want beer, you got it. I believe they've got wine. They've got soft drinks. They have for food. You want to go on. So one of the challenges that I think a lot of poker players have, it's hard to eat healthy in the poker room because there's not always great options. Manchester actually has good options, right? You can get something like grilled chicken with broccoli. You can get a salad. They also, if you want to have it, you can go get cheeseburgers, pizza, calzones, and fried seafood. So they have a great variety of pasta dishes, etc. Awesome. One of the things that they do is they give buffets on some of their 250s that they do, the 2-day tournament. Great food that they had there. So that's the room that I've got to pick. So we're almost wrapping up Poker Uncensored this evening. Let's see if we have any final questions here. Let's see. All right, we have a would you ever fold a king's pre-flop question. I believe we actually we actually covered this one when we had Joe Murphy on the second episode of the podcast. Yes, I have folded kings pre-flop. Would I do it again? It all depends on the situation. If I know the guy has pocket aces, I'm probably folding the kings. It's very difficult. I have done it once. It probably I can't imagine, to do that, you've got to have a very strong read on the person to basically be able to say, okay, I pretty much know this guy has aces, therefore I'm going to lay down pocket kings. Now, the other possibility, right, if you have pocket kings, and they have also got pocket kings. That's not the worst laydown because really you're not winning any money, right? You're just going to be chopping. So if you lay down pocket kings against pocket kings and you lose, one big blind or whatever, or you lose three big blinds, it's not the worst scenario. So if you think they've got only aces or kings and you have kings, then yeah, you could probably find a fold there. All right. And then their last question that came in is not really poker related, but that question is, who do you think will win the presidential election in 2020? And if I had to make a prediction right now, I would put my money on President Trump. And the reason I would put my money on President Trump, I think the Democratic Party right now is having too much infighting. They're not able to align behind a candidate that they know can beat the president. And in that case, he probably gets reelected. And this impeachment thing, it's not going to help Democrats. It's just going to alienate people from them. Look at Wisconsin, Scott Walker recall. He won with a bigger margin. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining Poker Uncensored this evening. This will wrap up tonight's broadcast. For those who joined late, you'll be able to find it on YouTube and play it back. And we will be back. Don't let people trick you. Some people say Poker Uncensored is going to die. The podcast is over. That's not true. We will be back. There will be an episode 6, and you can look for that in late October. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.